Hi everybody, I'm joined today by the National Secretary of the Socialist Equality Party and regular contributor and writer for the World Socialist website, and, I might add, my mate, Chris Marsden. How are you, Chris?
Hi then, Gordon. How are you? Very
Yeah,
good to
I'm
be
very
here.
good, mate. It's the news is a bit slow at the moment, mate, so I think we probably won't have much to talk about in this stream.
There's the famous Chinese saying, isn't there? May you live through interesting times.
Yeah, well, we certainly do at the moment. We're in the middle of this crisis at the moment, this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic. What do you make of it, and what do you make of how the government so far have reacted to it? I know you've written about the bailout that they gave to the banks almost immediately on this outbreak happening. What do you make of how they've reacted to it, and how the public have reacted to it so far?
Well, I think those are two different things. Um, how did they react to it? Well, initially they didn't react. The most extraordinary thing about the pandemic in its initial stages is that something that was entirely predictable, in which they'd anticipated, they'd put forward, they'd had wargaming or the equivalent of what it would mean to have such a pandemic, and their response to findings that said that the National Health Service, for instance, in Britain would be quickly overwhelmed, and various predictions of hundreds of thousands of dead, was to carry on slashing the National Health Service, privatising, and throwing money at themselves at the same time in the form, first the bailout of 2008, and then as this pandemic developed, throwing another 350 billion pounds at themselves. So, how did they respond? They responded as a completely reactionary class uh, can only respond. They responded in furtherance of their own predatory interests at the expense of the working class, its livelihoods, and its very lives.
What do you make of the bailout that they gave? The three is it 350 billion that they gave out just straight away? I mean, that was the first thing that they did before they even mentioned anybody, any workers, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think that if you want to know the sentiment in ruling circles, I think that they looked on this at first as it was problematic for them. It would have an economic impact. They wanted to, however, they had a discussion and they said that the policy really should be to let it play itself out, let the population become infected. The herd immunity strategy, which is no strategy at all. I mean, herd immunity strategies were always based on the existence of vaccines, not on the untrammeled spread of a disease. Uh, and then, as it became clear that this was having a major social impact, they were forced to carry out certain limited measures in defense of the working class. The restrictions on movement and so on and so forth, including, furloughing of sections of the workforce. But that was always a temporary measure. What was really responded to was they said, well, never let a good crisis go to waste. And they then said, clearly we've got to preserve the economy, so we'll throw vast sums of public wealth at the major banks and corporations,
This 300,
none of which is about preserving the economy. It's all about preserving the bottom line. It's the most extraordinary, literally trillions and trillions of dollars, whether it's the United States, Germany, Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom, Australia. They're all throwing hundreds and hundreds of billions of whatever their national denomination currency is straight into the pockets of the super rich.
so there was a magic money tree after all, wasn't there? There were
Well,
several by the look of it.
well, if you look at the economy over the last period, the only real sources of growth is not. I'm not saying there aren't certain industries that have developed. Of course, they have. But in general, the economy has been in a complete crisis since 2008. And the major source of wealth, and it's not real wealth as in societal wealth, as in, development of production and goods and services, because they're all being slashed to the bone, is government bailouts and share buybacks by companies.
Yeah.
Now, that used to be called insider trading, because what it is that they buy their shares in order to artificially inflate the price of their shares,
Yeah.
using not their own resources, but public monies through quantitative easing.
As Ponzi schemes go, it's an absolute delight for them, isn't it? I mean, they've been given this £350 billion bailout. Now they've said that these are for loans, haven't they? But the thing is, I know a little bit about businesses. I've had two failed businesses myself, and I happen to know that they are only going to give you a loan as a bank if you don't need it. If you need it, you don't get it. And obviously, the businesses, I would have thought that they're going to need the loans the most in the next few months, and the ones that we need to protect are obviously the small businesses and the moms and pops, etc. They're the ones that we're going to need to protect, and they're not going to be able to get these loans, are they? These loans are actually going to go to the people who are going to buy their shares back on from the stock exchange and artificially inflate it. This is just continuing on the Ponzi scheme, isn't it?
Yeah, it's worse than a Ponzi scheme, in as much as what it is organized theft. They're taking social wealth from the working class that produces everything and just seizing it. This is like a bank robbery with the government organizing the weaponry. They've been given the keys to the national treasuries,
and they're doing it with public money.
Yes,
they're doing it with money that really could go to the public, and it could go to. I mean, what do you think about what they've done with regards to? I mean, obviously, you write for the World Socialist website, and you're a true, as Brian Clough would say, you're a good socialist. What do you think of the way that they've treated workers so far? They originally came out and said, right, okay, we're going to pay out 80% of all PAYE people. And they've come out and said that they're going to pay 80% of the self-employed, which includes people like me. But I'll have to wait months and months for that. But so far as I can tell, Chris, the people who are keeping this country afloat right now have got jack shit. They haven't got anything, have they?
Well, not only have they not got anything, their lives have been placed in really serious danger.
I know.
They've just acknowledged that 19 NHS workers have died so far, and they haven't even got proper PPE.
And these are obviously people that have been, I mean, there was the junior doctor thing a few years ago, wasn't there, when they went out on strike, and all the vitriol that they received in the media. I remember the Sun saying sack the docs at the time of that. The NHS has been gutted like you wouldn't believe. You and I obviously know all about the details with regards to the Tony Blair years and the PFIs, and the making it basically into the NHS into an organisation that was basically just losing money, so they could say, see, we've got to privatise it. And then these people who have been shortchanged, should we say, for the want of a better word, over years, and it's not just Tories, is it? It's not just Tories, it's Labour as well going over the years. It's the political system itself. They've been, put upon and shortchanged. They haven't got the equipment that they need. They haven't got the wages that a living wage these nurses are on. What the nurses start on is ridiculous. And now they've been thrown into the front lines of a pandemic without PPE. They haven't been offered anything apart from a round of applause.
Well, there's those gathering on the streets to applaud the National Health Service. That's millions of workers who are genuinely consider doctors, nurses, ancillary staff as heroes. And then there are a bunch of cynical liars, hypocrites, and frauds. I mean, Boris Johnson standing outside number 10, clapping for the National Health Service, is like, the Yorkshire Ripper going into a women's refuge. This is the most disgusting example of hypocrisy and cynicism, and it's ubiquitous. Because the thing about it is that the discussion that's actually taking place behind closed doors, and which is now being introduced back into the equation, is that this was all about, in Johnson's immortal words, squashing the sombrero. That you're going to have a peak in COVID-19 cases, so we flatten it, and then that will mean the National Health Service will be able to cope. Well, I mean, if I could just, we wrote an article today which is citing, sorry if I don't have it printed out, I'm very sorry, but they've got, Byline Times got a transcript of a government discussion in which a deputy science advisor to the government, Robert Shute, is recorded. This is what he said in this conversation. It's perfectly okay to carry on around your business. This was when they were talking about sending 2,000 home office workers back to work next week. It's perfectly okay to carry on around your business, and it's vitally important that you do, as there's a whole bunch of supply chains and the economy that needs to continue running. I keep coming back to this point that we are all going to get this coronavirus at some point. We can't hide away from it forever, but we can manage the way in which we are exposed. It's certainly not something we're going to be able to squash and eliminate. The current interventions are to see within a few weeks whether we can find a method of managing it within the population. That is just a managing of it. That is not an elimination of it. Talk for the moment is around a peak and managing the current outbreak. And this is the key point. This doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a second, third, fourth, fifth, and even more peaks as we go into many months and many years. We're going to have to get used to a different way of living with this at home and at work. So that's what the government is really discussing behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's do you think vaccinations are going to be the norm going forward from this?
Well, at the moment they haven't got a vaccine.
Yeah, obviously, there's not going to be. I can't see a return to normal in the next few months, but obviously the next year or so they might be able to develop one. Do you think that they're going to be using this to restrict travel, etc.?
I don't know. The point about it is that that there were very definite and real reasons, necessary reasons on a scientific basis for restrictions on travel, but we're not blind to the fact that those carrying out those necessary restrictions is the capitalist state.
Yeah.
And once they've got certain powers, they will not relinquish them. They see this as a massive strengthening of their hand in an ongoing warfare against the working class. So there are really grave threats to democratic rights posed by this crisis. Yeah. And we always, our basic standpoint is you go with the scientists. And what the scientists said was necessary was that there need to be restrictions. How could it be otherwise when they'd done nothing to prepare for it? It's the bluntest method imaginable is to try and stop the spread of a disease. But there's been no coordinated response to coronavirus. Research is carried on by innumerable competing corporations on the basis of commercial considerations. There was no strengthening of the National Health Service or any other health service throughout the world, no recruiting of doctors. There was all of the things that had to accompany such a lockdown, such as monitoring cases, testing for coronavirus, transmission, who people have been in contact with, all the fine details that would have prevented this thing taking on the dimensions that it is doing and will continue to do, were not done.
No.
And now you see the response of the police, etc., is yes, we're going to tell you what you can do and all the rest. Now you imagine the situation. What are they talking about now? They're talking about a phased return to work.
Mm-hmm.
Not under conditions in which they've got this coronavirus under control,
No.
but under conditions in which they said they've flattened the curve, that the cases are going down. Well, that's yet to be proved, actually, because it's early days.
Yeah.
And if you look at the world situation, this thing hasn't really hit Africa yet like it will do. India, Pakistan, countries with minimal health services. So many, many more people are going to die from this disease.
Yeah.
And as he says, it's not just one peak.
Several.
It'll be 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, it'll be several.
And the World Health Organization has said it's really wrong to consider a premature return to work. But the point about it is that this is the response has gone in phases. First of all, they said to hell with everybody. Then there was the public backlash and certain concerns about the economic impact. Mm-hmm. So they gave some minimal concessions to the working class. They gave themselves a big fat down payment, and it is only a down payment. 350 billion is not where it's going to stop.
That's very
true. Chancellor Merkel, she said it's unlimited. And that's the reality. They're going to carry on.
When they say that, do they not realise to the average person? They must realise the average person on the street is looking at them as if to say, well, everything you've told me for your entire career is total bollocks then. Because if you're saying it's unlimited, then everything you have told us all of your career is complete bollocks, because you've been saying for ages, no, there's not an unlimited money supply, there's no real magic money tree, and now it is there after all. And for the last 10 years, Chris, from what I can see since the 2008 crisis, if you go back you could go all the way back to World War II, and from World War II to the 1970s, you'll know more about this. Wages went up with profits. There's that graph that goes up, and then in the 1970s it splits, and wages stop the same and profits go off the screen. The reason for that is the money ran out. They realised, oh shit, the money's no money. There's no money in the top of if you look at it like an egg timer, a sand timer. There was a hole in the system, and all the money ran out. So what they did is they turned the sand up and had a system totally opposite to how it was before. They used to have it where wages went up with profits, and they went, no, all the money going to the profits now, and we'll have this era of neoliberalism. They turned the sand timer upside down, and again, because they didn't address the corruption, etc., the money ran out. Now, from what I can tell in 2008, and I know that I'm putting this in the plainest terms possible for people, since 2008, it happened again and the money ran out. So they can't turn the egg timer back up the way it was, because that would be stupid. So instead what they did was they opened the top and just poured as much money as possible in as possible. And they have been doing that for the last 10 years. The 2008 crisis, as far as I can tell, it never ended. We're just seeing the repercussions from it. Now, I'm an idiot, Chris. I'm an idiot sitting in a council flat in the West Midlands, and I can figure this shit out. So, surely the people down there in Westminster know all this, and they're just going along with his complete ridiculous scenario where they're just printing money left, right, and centre. I mean, what happened to inflation? Isn't it at zero right now? They've been printing money non-stop for the last 10 years. Can you explain any of this to me? Because I look at it and I just think this is complete and utter horseshit that you have been telling us all of your careers.
Well, I think that, yes, that there is a case in which a lot of lies are being exposed, but I just caution against an approach to say this is just an issue of money. Because the phrase "there is no magic money tree."
Yeah,
I mean, it's what it basically.
It was a soundbite, wasn't it?
It's a soundbite, and what it basically means is there's no money for you. So, but the point about it is that this is not just a monetary crisis. The source of all wealth is when a worker goes into a factory and makes something, or a worker provides a service.
Mm-hmm.
And under capitalism, the fruits of that labor, he or she gets a tiny percentage, or a relatively small percentage of what he makes. He doesn't. No, he or she makes. They don't get what they make.
No,
the worker. They get a wage, and once they've made enough goods, what they realize the cost of employing them, then everything else is profit. It's gravy for the owners of the means of production, the factory owners, the major corporations. But what happened is that relationship between production and profit, the fabulous, endless enrichment of a financial oligarchy, was broken. There was a massive creation of fictitious capital that had no relationship to the actual economy. Speculation on a rampant scale, and it's been going on for a long, long time. And in 2008, it came crashing down because corporations and banks everyone suddenly realized that they were in fact insolvent.
Right.
There was nothing behind them. And what they did, because that could have been the 1930s then, instead of realizing, it's some sort of, sort of pragmatic, common sense response that, you'd have to recognize the crisis. What they did is they opened up all of the accumulated wealth of society, and they handed it over to the corporations and the banks. Trillions. Estimates are vary widely.
So these people and these banks and these big businesses that had caused the whole process the whole crash in the first place by their unscrupulous practices and their housing bubble, the subprime mortgages, wasn't it?
All of that.
So the people who caused it with this greed, because they had been proven that they couldn't be trusted with this money, then got a shed load more. There were no repercussions.
Vast amounts more good, and I mean just beyond comprehension. If you consider the fact that after the initial crisis, there's been this constant increase in share values. I mean, certain points it's gone down, but look at what's happening now in the midst of some of one of the gravest economic crises, which even capitalist economists are saying threatens a downturn much worse than the 1930s.
Yeah, it's like having the 1929 crash in the middle of World War II, isn't it? Because you've not just got the crash; the whole economy has stopped.
Yeah, they're still making money, vast amounts of money. Share values have been going up. I mean, they wobble and it might not continue. But here's the thing. They also know that even with that separation, they must get the workers back to work. They must start the process of profit accumulation again.
Well,
so they're saying to people, grow up, learn to live with it.
Yeah, we're all in this together.
Your granny might die, your mother might die, your father might die, but you've got to go back to work because that's the way it is.
And suck it up because that's the British
suck
way.
Suck it up.
Suck it up, swallow it. This is what it is.
The economic damage is much worse. What is the Trump's phrase? We don't want the cure to be worse than the disease.
You're saying there, suck it up and swallow it and what have you. We have seen over the last few weeks, haven't we, mate, who the real essential workers are in this country.
Indeed.
And it's not the hedge fund manager, and it's not the banker, and it's not, it's not any of these liberal columnists in the Guardian. They're not the people who are essential. The people who are essential are the people who are, for the most part, on the lowest wages.
Mm-hmm.
What does it
Essential
say?
workers.
What does it say about the system that we have? That the most important people in our society and the most important jobs in society are paid the least. And what does it say about this system that not only are these people put upon and paid the least and had their workers' rights, etc., taken away the most, but also now they're just being told this, suck it up, swallow it, do this. They're not being promised anything. And also, I can't see them demanding anything as well, because everything's so fractured and people are so worried and in their bubbles with this crisis that they're not demanding anything. What do you think they should be demanding, Chris? Because I think they should be demanding the earth right now, because when this crisis is over, if they haven't demanded anything and got something off them and taken something from them, they're not going to be given anything, are they?
Sorry, I understand the point you're making, Gordon, but I don't think the approach is correct, and this is why. Because when you talk about the wages matched profits, and then they stopped, there was this bifurcation. Profits kept going up, wages flatlined. That's not just in the realms of economics. That the answer to that is to be found in the realm of the class struggle.
Okay.
What happened is that under conditions of a relative boom, the organisations that the working class had, like the Labour Party, the trade unions, could, based on their programme and the notion that there could be some form of social contract, you could withdraw labour and put a little bit of pressure on the employers and get a wage rise. You could put in a government that would guarantee certain minimal reforms. There would be the National Health Service, you would get unemployment benefit, pensions, etc. Once the crisis hit, that began to change. But what happened? The whole basis of sort of isolating a national economy and running and achieving a certain social compromise was broken up by the globalization of world economy.
Yeah.
Corporations really became transnational. Okay. Finance became vastly more important in the running of the world economy. There was a financialization, there was a transnational, a globalization of production.
Yeah, there's war on the unions in the 80s.
Yeah, and corporations then said, if you go on strike, we'll just move.
We'll give your jobs to the Mexicans or the Chinese. Or
we'll move, yes. And the response of the bureaucracies, which were always agents of big business, was to say, right, our task now is not to go through a process where you're trying to increase the wages and conditions of my members, but I've got to organise the give back, the concessions that are demanded by big business. And they went to the workforce and said, if you don't accept this, if you don't take it on the chin, you're going to lose your job, because it's going to go to Germany, or it's going to go to France, or it's going to go to Poland. And there was a complete abandonment of the old style reformist policies of the labour and trade union bureaucracy, and their transformation ever closer integration into the structures of government and management. They became openly a sort of industrial police force for the ruling class. And the working class paid the price for that in a historic reversal of its social position. That continues to this day.
What do you think they need to do, the working class, to actually reverse this and to change something going forward then? Because it's plain that the system that we've had for the last 30, 40 years has basically screwed the people who are most important in this country right now. And this cannot carry on. And surely the people in this country will be looking at this the same way as I am and just thinking, well, we need, obviously, to change this. It's blatantly obvious that the way things are going, we're just going to be like lemmings running over a cliff if we carry on doing this. Surely we're going to change it. So what do the working class, and what are you calling for the workers to do? Because it's got to change. It can't carry on like this. These are the people who have been put upon and persecuted the most, and now they've been thrown into the front lines against a pandemic with no PPE.
Well, this crisis didn't start with the
No,
coronavirus
it didn't.
pandemic.
This crisis started with the neoliberal policies because, I mean, we knew this is the third coronavirus pandemic we've had this century. No, not pandemic, the first coronavirus outbreak we've had this century. So in the last 20 years, this is the third. There was one in 2002, that was the SARS one, that's coronavirus, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then there was another one I think in 2012. So this is the third, and you say they've done war games before and war game this out. So they knew that these viruses were a problem, and they knew that they were in our future, and they still didn't make sure that we had enough ventilators or masks. And rather than concentrate on making sure that we've got the equipment and safeguarding against pandemics that they knew were going to happen, they've decided to just try and strip the NHS of everything that they possibly can and make it as
Right.
unprofitable as they possibly can, with a view to, in the future, I am sure, selling it off to piece by piece to American corporations.
Well, that's already been proceeding apace. There's so much of the National Health Service that's been privatised already,
Yeah.
and there's so much of it that's been cut to the bone. But just to come back to your point, what does the working class do? First of all, it's not the case that they've not done anything. There's enormous amount of resentment and anger at what is taking place.
I'm not surprised.
You know, when people are traveling to work on buses and they've got no personal protection, it's overcrowded because they've cut the services, or on the underground in London, where they rammed onto platforms with a Sunday service.
I know, that was pathetic. It was pathetic when this started. Sorry to cut you off there, but when this started, the media immediately attacked everybody. Look at them rammed on these underground tube stations. They didn't mention that there was a skeleton train service that day, and that's why they were rammed on. There was less people going, but there was less trains as well. That's why they... Sorry. Just a point I wanted to make.
There's a very important political imperative to blame the worker.
Yeah.
You know, it's your fault, you're stupid. You know, they were saying, you know, people were breaking the curfew and so on and so forth. Well, they were being told Boris Johnson was going around shaking people's hands, and his father was saying, I'm going out for a pint, and making like it was all a big joke. So little wonder people got the wrong message.
Yeah, I spoke to
little wonder that Boris Johnson ended up with coronavirus.
Yeah, I spoke to two coppers, and they were saying, I said to them, have you getting any mixed messages? They just started laughing at me. The one guy says, Boris Johnson's telling us to do one thing, and our chief is telling us to do something totally different. He says, we don't know what we're supposed to be. And that's a policeman saying it to me. So, sorry, I cut you off.
The main thing was that people were told to continue working.
Yeah.
So you've got bus drivers dying.
It makes you wonder whether they wanted, with this herd immunity, to just turn the tap on a little bit, you know, they knew it was going to happen. So it's like they wanted to turn the tap on to get this herd immunity, and then, oh no, we backed off from it. It makes you wonder whether this was the plan all along, doesn't it?
No, I don't think. I think the plan was herd immunity, full stop.
You think it was just let it hit the country?
The reason why they abandoned it is because of public reaction, not even because of scientific advice, because they're ignoring scientific advice. Apart from, you know, those that was so cavalier and saying, yeah, herd immunity, how many deaths? Okay, fair enough. Really? It's not, you know, each death is a statistic. It's a human life that's lost.
Yeah, it's a human
life. But the point about it is that it was not, the vast bulk of advice was to say you had to stop this. And the reason why China could get it under control is because it experienced the impact of pandemics before, of coronavirus, the other coronavirus, and they were prepared for it. And they did their best to squash it. And it had some success. And now, you know, several countries are on their way to overtaking the deaths in China for that reason. But the thing about it is that workers had no choice but to go to work because when, for example, if you look at the situation in the Royal Mail, this is were working under terrible conditions. No, not even toilet facilities, let alone PPE.
Yeah, and this is.
I mean, anybody that's been into a factory knows that the bathrooms are just disgusting.
Yeah.
Thousands of people using very few facilities, and then they were given nothing. They were given no gloves. They were given no hand sanitizers. They were given nothing, and they were sent out to work.
Here's your bag. Go and
there was
deliver the
actually
letters.
already a ballot for strike action. And instead of, when there was a vote for strike action, the Communication Workers Union turned around and said, as responsible, blah, 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 we're not going to go ahead with the strike action. And moreover, not only that, but we're offering a working partnership in which we will become the fifth essential service. So they said to their members, okay, you wanted to protect your jobs, wages and conditions. And instead of saying you should add to that, you protect your livelihoods by an insistence on proper safety, they said, we're going to offer you for nothing to the employers and to the government, and we're going to into discussions with Royal Mail and Boris Johnson, and we're going to work out some great compromise. And the compromise was, well, just go and get stuffed.
Yeah, the compromise was get back to work and deliver these letters.
Yes, get out there and deliver your junk mail. That cost lives, but just to come back, so I know this is a long way around, but that, as I said, it didn't start with coronavirus. For decades now, the working class has had no leadership worthy of the name.
No.
The trade unions function as appendages of management. The Labour Party under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown became essentially a Thatcherite pro-market party. Now, we were told 5 years ago now that the election of Jeremy Corbyn was going to fix all that. He was going to steer the party back to the left, and literally hundreds of thousands of working and young people joined the Labour Party with that intention. And what happened? Exactly the opposite.
Exactly the opposite.
Corbyn capitulated and capitulated and capitulated and capitulated ad infinitum. There wasn't a single issue on which he waged a fight. The Blairites were on the back foot, and Corbyn put them right back on the front foot. While he suppressed the class struggle and allowed the employers to carry on their attacks, he told Labour councils that they should implement whatever austerity measures were demanded of central government. He supported NATO. He supported the Trident. He gave them a free vote on war in Syria. He refused to defend his own members from being accused of being anti-Semites. Even people who were his long-time collaborators were thrown under the bus.
Chris Williamson.
And the end result of it all is that all the Blairites are now in a cabinet run by Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer, the multi-millionaire Blairite, the person who insisted that Julian Assange the attempt to railroad Julian Assange to Sweden should be continued. The person that has got the most filthy record of political betrayals, and he's filling his cabinet with the likes of Jess Phillips.
I know. It brings me on to, I wanted to ask you about Sir Keir, or as I call him, Mr. Irrelevant, because that's exactly what he is, mate. This party is dead. Isn't it? It's completely irrelevant now, this Labour Party is, isn't it?
Yes. It's not irrelevant in one sense, that it's still there and it still operates as an instrument for the ruling class. And they're going to call on it at some point. There's every likelihood that they're going to call on it to form a government of national unity if this crisis gets any worse.
Well, it's gonna I keep hearing that, this national unity government. I mean, the first thing he's done when he's gone in this mystery irrelevant is say that we're going to support the government and we're going to kick out anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, to which I did a video and said, you haven't got anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, you've got a bunch of politicians in the Labour Party who are apologists for apartheid. That's your problem. It's not anti-Semitism. But, I mean, I don't want to go off on that route again.
Mm.
This
you
is
haven't
making
got
a mockery.
institutionalised anti-Semitism. You've got institutionalised anti-socialism.
Yeah, it is. It's so true. And yeah, because they don't. They say that they're a party of democracy, and they want their party to the party to democratically elect, the people that they want in power, but they put roadblocks in the way of that at every single opportunity. I mean, if it was left up to the members of the party, every single Blairite in that party would have been voted out by now. I am absolutely 100% sure of it. But they have put things in place to protect people like Jess Phillips and Ruth Smith and Kinnock, haven't they?
What they put in place to protect Jess Phillips, etc., was Jeremy Corbyn.
Really? How do you?
Yes, Jeremy Corbyn opposed all expulsions. He said that
I can't argue with you, Chris.
He was for the unity of the Labour Party under any circumstances. Momentum, the organisation was set up supposedly as a rank and file organisation, was the one that kept left-wing people out of the Labour Party. And they got the membership list and they policed it. You had the demands for automatic reselection that were blocked by the National Executive Committee, by the trade unions, with the full say-so of Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, et al. What happened is that the Labour Party was in a complete state. Corbyn got elected because they really underestimated the degree of dissatisfaction that existed broadly in the working class. They thought he was a token candidate, and then he won, and then they tried to get rid of him, and then he won again. And hundreds of thousands of people joined the party, and Jeremy Corbyn was the man that policed that movement and prevented a challenge to the Blairites, kept them in the saddle, burnt people's ambitions out, disappointed them, betrayed them, and handed things back to the Blairites. And the Labour Party today is further to the right than it was under Tony Blair.
I know.
Tony Blair would have balked at saying that he was going to be able to support the Tories. But Keir Starmer? I mean, Keir Starmer is DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yeah, he was the chief of the Met when Assange sought asylum inside the embassy in, was it 2011, 2012? It was his department that told the Swedish prosecutors not to get cold feet and extended the period of which the Sweden, I mean, they basically they didn't want Sweden to interview him in this country, did they? They wanted to say that they wanted to interview him. They extended that period. Obviously, he's on their side here. He's not on the side of justice, is he?
They wanted a back channel to get into the United States. That's what they wanted.
Well, they got it. I want to talk to you about Julian Assange, because 1 year ago today it was, Chris. It's the 11th of April. 1 year ago today. Was it yesterday, you say?
No, he was arrested. I'm agreeing with you, Jordan.
1 year ago today, he was dragged out of his asylum in what John White, I think, accurately described as an act of fascism on home soil. What can you... When I met you as a result of the Julian Assange thing, that's where we met first, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I really, over the last few months, I've found it more and more difficult to talk about Julian Assange because I get so fucking angry. It is incredible. You met me, and one of the first things you saw me do was scream at the media, to the point where 3 of them or 4 of them ran away with the tail between their legs because I had screamed at 2 members of the press association or the Associated Press or something like that who were supposedly covering the event. And these people, honestly, the one kid was about 12 years old and the other kid was about 14, and he was with the camera getting in front of my fiance's face and stopping her from filming because he thought he was the big I am and I'm the press association. That changed when I got there because I honestly nearly kicked the shit out of them. And you took me aside and you said, Gordon, be careful. They're going to use that. I have to be really careful with you talking about Julian Assange because I am so fucking livid at what my country are doing right now, and other entities around the world. Because let's face it, it's not just the UK that don't want him to seeing the light of day. It's other countries around that we are subservient to as well. What do you? This. Let's talk about the. See, I'm getting mad, just tense, just talking about it. What do you? This coronavirus, it's whipping through Belmarsh, apparently. He had a conversation with somebody the other day, Julian Assange did, and said to this person, this one death at Belmarsh, it's more than that he's sure of, and it's ripping through Belmarsh. Now, in the United States, they are releasing prisoners. One of these prisoners was a rapper called something 69 or something like that, who was being associated with violent gang robberies, and multiple of them, and the United States are releasing him because it would be inhumane keeping him behind bars whilst this coronavirus is whipping through prisons. Whilst at the same time, Judge Baraitser is refusing to let Julian Assange out because, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, Chris, the reason behind it is he's not actually in prison having committed any crime.
Extraordinary, isn't it?
At what point did we just rip up the Magna Carta, mate? At what point did the United Kingdom judiciary system just throw it all fucking overboard? Is there no judicial process in this country? Because if you look at the Assange case, it's clear then there is none, isn't there?
What's happened to Julian Assange? I mean, first of all, you and I know, and I'm sure a lot of people are watching, will watch this, know that he's the most significant political prisoner in the world today.
I think he will go down as one of the names of the 21st century. I think in 100 years, people will still be talking about Julian Assange. That's how important that man is and what he stands for.
Well, his basic principle is that the public has the right to know, and it has the right to know not just about any old thing, but about war crimes, about high crimes and misdemeanors by the state. And he exposed things which earned him the enmity of ruling elites all over the world. I don't think what's happening is because Britain is subservient to the United States. I think what's happening is because Britain is absolutely united with the United States on their absolute intention to silence him forever. It's not even a master-servant relationship. It's a gang up between fellow criminals.
Yeah.
To silence the person who are exposing their crimes. Now, if you're talking about what's happened, this defies description. Sometimes you search for literary allusions and you think about Orwell in 1984 or Kafka and the trial, that this is Kafkaesque. But they're now talking about Assange staying in prison, won't release him, despite that he's just on bail. He's still just on a bail violation. They're saying he's a flight risk. He's a flight risk under conditions of a lockdown, in which there is a disease ripping through the prison and even the prison staff population, which is clearly a threat to someone who's immunocompromised, that's got a lung condition.
He's got a chronic lung condition, this guy.
He's got a chronic lung condition. His life is in danger. And Judge Baraitser, the mysterious Judge Baraitser, who no one knows anything, knows from a bar of soap, tells everyone that no, there's no problem in the prisons and that he still represents a flight risk. And they're now considering holding a a second part of his hearing in which he won't be able to attend. There's no guarantee of any communication with his lawyers. Witnesses won't be able to attend. I mean, this is a show trial.
It's a show trial.
Yeah,
it's a show trial.
It's a crime of monumental proportions. And it's developing and unfolding under conditions in which, as we pointed out, because we wrote a perspective this week, and we called it Vindictive Court Rulings Prove British State Wants Assange Dead. Because that's the only conclusion that can be drawn.
Of course.
They either want him to die in prison, or if he doesn't die, then they want nothing to stop him being railroaded in what is the equivalent of extraordinary rendition to the United States to put him in for a life sentence. 150 years, a life sentence, never to see the light of day again. And it's, first of all, it's to silence him. Yeah. And secondly, it's to intimidate and to establish a precedent that if you tell the truth, if you expose war crimes, if you carry out basic journalistic practices, and they reveal the criminal activities of the ruling elite, then this is what you will expect. Yeah. Because this was a man who was on the front cover of Time and Newsweek and was a massively popular figure. And they launched the most vicious, brutal, character assassination, vindictive, lying campaign to discredit him, to turn him into a pariah. And everybody went along with it in official ruling circles, including the Labour Party, including the trade unions, including the supposedly left-talking groups, the Socialist Workers' Party, the Socialist Party, the lot of them. They all said, oh, yes, there's no smoke without fire. We must believe these women. He should go to Sweden. And they didn't even bother writing an article on him from 2012 until he was arrested. Complete blockage, a betrayal of monumental proportions.
Absolutely.
And if they do that to him, that characterizes them. No one should ever forget who did what.
No, and I've made a point. I've made a point of saying, of pointing out. I know you're National Secretary of the Socialist Equality Party, and I've made a point of pointing out that basically the only political party who has consistently stood up for Julian Assange over the last decade, and that's horrific because the connotations for the democratic process. Nobody can look at our election in 2019. Not a single goddamn person say that was a fair election. That was a fair election. That was a true democracy, because it wasn't. And if anybody was to honestly try and say that to me, I'd laugh in their face. It was pathetic. But the connotations for democracy here are the thing with Assange that really gets me, because let's just say, all right, and not just democracy, journalism as well. And journalism is the fourth estate. It's the thing that holds power to account in a democracy. And let's say I get a leak from somebody in this country who maybe is in American intel. I don't know. I get a leak and it proves that the Americans have done something and akin to collateral murder. And let's just remember, collateral murder was just one item. There were many, many war crimes that those releases from Manning exposed. So it comes to me, I get this release, and let's say I get it from two different places. So I've got two sources that are giving me the same thing. If I go public with that, the precedent with this is that the logical steps that will be taken from there is I'll be hounded into a political asylum somewhere. The media will smear me as a rapist for 8 years and cheer this on. And then the government will come in, drag me out of my asylum in an act of fascism and throw me in Belmarsh until, a show trial of which I'll probably end up dying of some mysterious disease or being Epsteined in a cell somewhere. This is the precedent it's setting in this country. This is diabolical. This is great fucking Britain, Chris. What's great about that? What's great about the fact that if I was to leak something that proved that the United States had committed a war crime in a lie that they dragged us into based on lies, if I release information that proves that, they're going to throw me in our version of Guantanamo Bay. How the fuck is that a democracy? And how the fuck can anybody say that that is standing up for journalism? And what does it say about our country, Chris? Because you can see I'm getting worked up just talking. This is why I don't talk about it as much anymore, because I get so wound up. But they're not giving people an incentive to be a good person here. They're not giving people an incentive to do the right thing. Because if you are a good person and you do the right thing, they drag you off and throw you in fucking Belmarsh. And then smear and have the media just lie and lead a character assassination about somebody who has only ever been right.
Well, look, here's the thing, Gordon. Here's the thing. There is an old saying: "Don't get mad, get even." Right?
I don't know how to get even though. I drove myself insane trying to help him. He wrote to me, Chris, and asked me to save his life.
Well, the issue is, Gordon, this is the issue that, as far as we're concerned, in the Socialist Equality Party and the World Socialist website and the International Committee, we understand, our basic understanding is that nothing that's happened to Assange, of course it should cause outrage, but nothing is surprising. There is no constituency within ruling circles for the preservation of democratic rights. Not because of some character flaw on their part, but because social tensions, the conflicting interests between classes, have reached such a pitch of intensity that you can't maintain democratic forms of rule. There's no support for wars. There's no support for austerity. There's no support for the constant demands to take it on the chin in the broad mass of the population. People's lives have become increasingly difficult. People's lives have become increasingly impossible. Everybody's struggling. Everybody's in debt.
Yeah.
People are working long hours. Generations have grown up now that have known nothing but war, one damn war after another.
Yeah.
They've seen people go out to die. They've seen bombs dropped on innocent civilians. They've seen countries destroyed. There's no support for any of this. There's a huge well of social opposition and political opposition that finds no expression. But the ruling class knows that in that sense, that's not going to be there forever. There will be some form of political change. So what do? They attack, they go on the offensive, they silence, they intimidate, they mobilize everything that they've got in an attempt to behead the working class, to prevent it from having any conscious leadership. And you can't fight that on the basis of moral appeals. Of course, you should appeal for anyone who has a concern for democratic rights to rally to the support of Julian Assange. But ultimately, if you're fighting the state apparatus and you're fighting a ruling elite that is criminal, then you have to be able to mobilize a social force that is capable of combating that power. The ruling class has got its state apparatus. It owns the judiciary. It owns the media. There's no democratic avenue to be pursued for Julian Assange because there is no democracy. This is a show trial. We all know that now. Every appeal has failed, whether it's to the government, to the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, the trade unions. Nothing has been done for Assange.
The response,
in this country.
The response I got from Labour MPs was pathetic. It was pathetic. These are elected officials who haven't got a clue that this is probably the most important case with regards to journalism and democracy in the 21st century. They haven't got a clue. They were all saying that this was something to do with charges in Sweden. Somebody in a council flat, was having to tell elected officials there were no charges in Sweden. There never were. What are you talking about?
It's not purely ignorance. It's willful.
It's willful ignorance. Yes,
it's willful ignorance because they do not want to do anything that challenges the existing order. They are more than happy, as long as their privileged existences are maintained, as long as the social discontent is policed. They don't really care what that requires. I mean, you don't for one moment assume that you're speaking the same language, because you're not.
No.
This is not about logic. It's not about exposures. It's about basic social interests. Assange must be silenced because the working class must be repressed. And what we have to do in seeking Assange's freedom is to mobilize the necessary social force to make it possible. They have to be so scared. They have to be so scared at the implications of what they are doing that it's halted in its tracks.
How can that ever happen, though, Chris? Because I mean, this is the thing. How? I mean, we know that it needs to be done, and we know that people need to take the power back, and we know that people have the power. But at the moment, they're just giving the essential workers a round of applause instead of demanding that they get at least a living wage. I mean, where's living wage, hashtag living wage for workers? No, hashtag clap for them instead. It's very nice. Don't get me wrong, it was very nice clapping for them. And I happen to know that there are people at home right now who need some form of community. So going out and clapping gave them something as well. I'm fully aware of that. But we've got to give them more than a fucking round of applause, haven't we?
Look, Gordon, that's not... Look, I appreciate this, but you always have a very negative view of what the working class is thinking, or very one-sided. Because, look, that's not the whole picture. It's really not. People wanted a change. How do you explain Jeremy Corbyn if people just wanted things to be the same? They were led up the garden path. But, it's not something you can do twice.
Yeah, I'm okay. It's not that
the Labour Party.
I'm trying to think
of. Dead.
Why
is the Labour Party dead?
Totally.
Because a myth was put forward that you could transform the Labour Party. Corbyn has actually presided over the funeral of the Labour Party.
Yeah, and Mark Blythe says he was crisis management for a dying Labour Party, and he said that 2 years ago. And I look back and I just think that guy's a genius. He's a genius. He saw this years ago. I heard him say Jeremy Corbyn is crisis management for a dying Labour Party, I think in 2018. And I remember thinking, what's he saying there? But he was absolutely bang on again, Mark Blythe was.
I don't really know Mark Blythe, but we were saying it in 2015.
See, I didn't know you back then,
and
mate.
It's not because of genius. It's because we base ourselves on a Marxist assessment of the Labour Party, its history, its class character. And we said it was the latest example of a constantly failed experiment of pushing the Labour Party to the left. And you could not transform the Labour Party from what it is, which is a pro-imperialist, pro-capitalist party. And no amount of left rhetoric, and certainly not the whimsical, spineless left rhetoric of Jeremy Corbyn, was ever going to accomplish anything. This is a man who's been buried on the backbenches for decades, moaning and whining about what the Labour Party was doing while remaining true to it and taking in his daily wage. So that was never going to happen. But the thing about it is that, look, it's not because of the failures of the working class.
No, I'm not saying it is. What I'm trying to do, the reason I'm trying to come up with, I'm trying to brainstorm ideas. What can we do? Because they can't just have a round of applause. These workers, we have to do something for them. And that's where the frustration comes from, because it's like, how can we mobilize? They've got everything. They've got, the ruling elite. They even control social media now, so we can't organize on social media. They've got their ways of breaking that up and restricting reach, etc. And it's born out of frustration, because I can see that the working class want these things, and I can see that people on the ground want them. But there's a massive clear disconnect, as you pointed out there, between what the working class want and what the ruling elite is going to give them. I will tell you this. I mean, you mentioned there that, there needs to be a radical change of politics. I mean, I will never vote again if the structure does not change down there. I'll never vote again. This is pathetic. It's a dog and pony show down there. It's a theatre. There's nothing down there that they're doing that is in the interests of nothing at all. They're not down there in our political system. It's broken. It's not a democracy. It's not even close to it. It's not even a duh. We have to demand that this changes. Because if it doesn't fundamentally change, there really is no hope for us.
Well, look, the thing about it is, though, Gordon, is that, you're looking at what's happening politically, but you can't see that and really understand it unless you understand what's happening politically as a reflection of what's happened socially. I mean, the working class is being systematically impoverished, attacked. It's having its livelihoods destroyed, its wage levels destroyed, its public services destroyed. All the things on which millions rely are being systematically dismantled, eviscerated, ruined. People have no future under this system. No. It's not simply a failure in the political sphere, it's a failure in the social sphere.
Yeah,
there is no possibility of reconciling the interests of the working class and the capitalist class. What the coronavirus has revealed is just how rotten the existing social order is. And there's no going back from that. I mean, what are all the mantras that have been told to justify what you describe as neoliberalism? Well, it's the capitalists that take the risks. They're taking no risks.
No.
They're being handed money from the state.
They can take all the risks they want, because they know that if they fuck up, they'll just get bailed out.
The free market will provide. The free market can't even provide face masks. The miracle of the market. The miracle of the market has turned out to be a nightmare. I know you say it from some, but there's no magic money tree. Yes, there is. Yes, as long as it's for the ruling class.
Yes, there is. I've really been looking at that. There's a guy called David Graeber, who I'm not sure whether you're aware of. He wrote a great book called Debt, the First 5,000 Years. It took me about 5,000 years to read it. It's a long read. But you read it and you finish reading it and you say, okay, well, that's it then. The financial system is a complete Ponzi scheme and we need to throw it overboard and start again, because it's nonsense, this is. And that's essentially what we're facing right now. We've got a global financial system that is a giant Ponzi scheme. The very definition of it. Because if you don't keep putting money into this thing, it crashes. That's the very definition of a Ponzi scheme, isn't it?
Yeah, but Gordon, you see, we've had this discussion before, and I know it's not. No.
Can I tell people our discussion on this? Because when we first met, one of the reasons why I knew that me, Chris, and me were going to be friends, because he was asking me. He said to you, I think you said something like, "Are you a socialist?" And I said, "No, I'm not a socialist. I'm a post-capitalist." And you looked at me and you went, "Congratulations, you made up a fucking word."
I can't believe that I ever swore. But look,
you did. I think it was at that point now I thought, I'd rather like this fellow. I need to know more about him.
But listen, Gordon, it's not about changing the existing social order. It's about replacing the existing social order with one that actually meets up to what is required in the modern era.
Yeah.
Look, you have a situation in which humanity has developed the most fantastic productive techniques. Miracles have been performed. I mean, the things which are now possible in the world are extraordinary.
It's incredible, isn't it?
The level of scientific advance is extraordinary. Something like the coronavirus, if the wherewithal of struggling humanity was put to that task, it will be resolved. We have scientists which are just so, science is so incredible in what is accomplished. You know, even the fact that we're speaking via Skype is just an extraordinary thing.
It really is, and I think
but it's given over to the private accumulation of profit for a class which has become so grotesquely rich amidst absolute squalor and degradation, in which millions of people around the world, billions, are eking out an existence on less than $1 a day, in which terrible, brutal wars are being waged. Now, all of this is apparent, and it's apparent not just to you and me, but to very many people all around the world. But what has been absent? The working class has gone through the complete failure of organisations which it built and which it placed its trust in, whether it's a Labour Party, the trade unions, the communist parties. And they were told there was no alternative, that this was actually existing socialism, for example, in the Soviet Union. And there was no possibility of revolution. That's pie in the sky. You know, we are the expounders of realpolitik. What is possible? Slowly, slowly, catchy monkey, and all of the rest. You know, all of these nostrums have now been blown apart.
Yeah.
In a way in which it is never ever going to go back to. The issue is not whether massive social change is now on the agenda.
It's what massive social change is going to happen, because it is going to.
That's right. And the thing about it is if you leave it up to the ruling class, the massive social change will be the descent into ever more brutal forms of authoritarianism, the encouragement of the most vile forms of racism, chauvinism, xenophobia, the development of far-right and fascistic movements. In one country after another, it's Bolsonaro, or the AfD in Germany, or Trump in the United States, that present themselves as an existential threat to the working class, and the descent into trade and military war. Or the working class takes charge, replaces production for profit with production for social need, ends the archaic division of the world into antagonistic nations, and develops a planned system of production in which ends the threat of war, social hardship, and can harness the enormous powers that exist for the collective benefit of humanity. But in order to do that, it's got to tackle the one big issue that confronts the working class, which is the crisis of leadership that it confronts and perspective.
Yeah.
All the old parties failed. It's not just that the Labour Party is dead. What about the Democratic Party?
Honestly, the whole thing, it's like I say, I'm not going to be voting in this system again, because you're propping up a system that's just not fit for purpose. You know, that you mentioned the Democratic Party there. I mean, I look at the Democratic Party over in America, and I just think, how can... Yeah, I've still got progressive media in America, progressive media like the equivalent of me over in America, and one guy in Canada as well, who are retweeting polls as if polls mean anything. Your elections are rigged, people. Polling means nothing in a rigged election. They'll just change it. You go and speak to Tim Canova. You go and speak to, you know, the people in Broward County. You can see this. You don't have a democracy over there at the moment. And the Democratic Party, they have rigged things and managed to manipulate things to the point where now your choice in this election, it seemingly, is going to be the person the Democratic Party in 2016 were appalled had been caught on a mic saying, you can do anything with women when you're rich, you can grab them by the pussy, to putting up somebody who was being alleged recently by a person who years ago literally did grab them there. That's how politics has devolved in America. That's the Democratic Party now in America. And the Democratic Party, I can't believe they even get away with calling themselves Democratic, to be honest, because they've rigged their elections twice, and now they're going to have to subvert their own democracy again, because they've ended up with a guy who can't actually finish a sentence as their nominee. It's quite remarkable, isn't it, what's happened to them?
Yes. I mean, look, the point about it is that the essence of all political tendencies, the essential character of political tendencies, is being revealed by the actual development of the crisis of capitalism. You know, there's the conflict between Republicans and Democrats, between Labour and Conservative, etc., are conflicts within the ruling elite.
Yeah.
Then the working class doesn't have political representation at this point.
None at all.
That's the real crisis.
Yeah.
You know, if you say the Labour Party is dead, and I'm 100% with you, the Labour Party is dead as a dodo.
I mean,
as far as the working class is concerned.
You could say the same about the Conservatives, though. If you look at what they've gone through in the last 2 years, I mean, Brexit basically ripped their party apart. You could say it for both parties.
Yeah,
I'm with you, mate. I'm with you on that.
But if the Labour Party is dead, what do you do about it? Do you need a party?
Well, this is do you?
Well, I think you do, and I know that you don't, because you have these sort of semi-anarchist conceptions.
Well, my I just my political you other people who have been in politics and around politics all along and are very pragmatic about things and say you need to do this, that, and the other. And I know we've had these conversations in the past. I just want to put some Dr. Martens on, go down to Westminster and start kicking shit over. That's what I want to do, because it's not fit. It's not a democracy. It's not close to one. We need to change the system. Are we at least aligned on that? We can't carry on with the way that. I mean, you see, for instance,
you can't change the system with a pair of Doc Martens.
I don't know. Can you do it with a?
Yes.
Can you do it with some torches and some sticks and some? We need to do something, because it's just.
No, you can't. Look, it's not. Let's let anger rip. First of all, think and then act.
Oh, that's always been my Achilles heel, Chris.
That's what there's a German province: first thought, then action. And it's true. You have to think, what is the problem? Look, these are historically determined problems. There's a history of the working class. There's a history of the labour movement. There's a history of political tendencies. Nothing started when you became conscious of it. It was already there.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Obviously, I'm aware of that.
And I know, and I don't mean this to appear patronising. That's not the point. I'm trying to make a point, not a point against you.
Okay.
The thing about it is, Gordon, is that if you're going to judge politics, the first thing is you've got to understand the history of the class struggle and the history of politics. Because tendencies have emerged. They were defined over history. They were defined by their programme. They were defined by the social forces that they represented. They were defined by their response to major fundamental issues of historical dimensions. The character of the Labour Party was not determined by Jeremy Corbyn. The character of the Labour Party was revealed by the Corbyn phenomena.
Okay, I understand.
Its character was historically determined. The Labour Party was what it was, is what it is, and cannot be otherwise, because it crossed the Rubicon a long time ago, way before Jeremy Corbyn arrived on the back benches in the 1970s and 80s, 1980s, whenever it was.
Yeah.
And what is being revealed is that you can't proceed in this world without a map and a compass.
All right, so you can't proceed without a map and a compass. I totally agree, and I really I look forward to there being change in our political system. That's because until we get change in the political system, I cannot see the point of us even bothering to vote again, because there's no point. We've got they're not. They've broken the social contract. That's the point I'm trying to make. They've broken the social contract, and now they've done that, all bets are off. You know, I say I want to put on Dr. Martens and go and kick shit up. Honestly, that might be the only way that we do get any change in this country and around the world. You know, I know the longer time goes on, Chris, the more and more I'm starting to subscribe to the George Carlin way of thinking, that the only way things will really change is with massive bloodshed. I don't advocate it, but I can honestly see that. I think he might have been right. I know he was right about many things, but I think he might have been right. I think maybe the only way things are ever going to change for the better is with that massive revolution and with people rising up and taking back their rights. Because it's clear that the people who are in power right now in the United Kingdom are not just wielding it for their own benefit and against the working class, but also against democracy and against civil liberties and human rights as well. I mean, we've covered Julian Assange. I mean, I argue that if they can take the civil liberties and human rights, if they can strip them away from one person in this country right when he needed them the most, not a single one of us have them. None of us. And that's why I get so upset about these things, because I take it personally. And I know I'm not the only one.
Well, of course you're not, Gordon. But here's the thing. You raised about revolution. A revolution is not simply an uncontrolled outbreak of violence.
Isn't it?
I mean, that is like some, it's just the pitchfork moment. Look, clearly a revolution doesn't occur until the conditions exist for it.
Well, surely
there's a crisis.
Do you see my point?
Crisis rule. It's when the ruling class can no longer rule in the old way, and the working class can no longer live in the old way. But once you pose the issue of a revolution, what you're talking about? You're talking about a transfer of the overthrow of an entire social order and its replacement with another one.
What I'm talking about, Chris,
it's not simply a political shift; it's a social shift.
No, but what I'm talking about, what I'm asking, really, this is all I'm asking above all. I'm not advocating really revolution. I'm just saying, listen, the political system is debunked; it's useless. But what I'm saying is, we know this. All of us know this. All of us know that the political system in this country is absolutely useless. It's not fit for purpose. They've broken the social contract. We know that they've been underfunding the NHS for decades now, both political parties, and trying to sell it off abroad. We know that they knew that this coronavirus was going to happen at some stage and they did nothing to protect it. We know that they've been basically making the NHS not fit for purpose so they can sell it off for Americans. We know that they've been undervaluing the vital workers, the essential workers in this country. We know all of this, and we know that we have to change, and we know that everybody needs to get involved. And nothing is being done. Nothing. I don't see anybody. I don't see the working class getting organised in this country. I don't see people outside banging their pots and pans, make sure that these people get looked after because they've got shit wages, and some of them are having to work 3 or 4 jobs to get by with the, and they're essential jobs as well. I don't see any of this. What I do is I see nothing. I see people going, oh, Boris Johnson, oh, Jeremy Corbyn, and nothing is going to change if that continues. That's the point I'm trying to make here. And I understand that people are making calls for this and calls for that, but there's no organisation, nobody's on message, everybody's fractured, everybody's in their own little bubbles, and I can't see anything fundamentally changing going forward. And worst of all, if things do change, and we are in a period right now where we're in an interregnum, as my mate Mo says, in this interregnum with everybody being so fractured, I'm worried that they're going to take even more power away and screw the working class even more because we're not organised. Because, or say they are not organised. I'm trying to take myself out of it almost because I don't know how you stayed sane over the years, mate. It's knocked me about over the last year or two, trying to understand politics. I can see the problems. I can see them. But I don't see anything being done about them. I think that's the point I'm making. Rather than, I know I keep going back to the I want the revolution, but I can't see any other way it's going to change. That's the point really I'm trying to make.
Gordon, I'm not arguing against the necessity for revolution. As we're a revolutionary party, I'm saying, what is a revolution? A revolution is a seizure of state power by the working class.
Yeah.
It's socialist revolution. First of all, what does it mean? You are not, the ruling class doesn't get overthrown because, people go on the streets. Because they can go on the streets, and then the issue is posed, what about tomorrow? Mm-hmm. What about the army, the navy, and the air force, and the police, and all the rest?
Yeah.
You have to develop a leadership in the working class which has a conscious perspective for social change, for taking state power. The reason why the revolution was successful in Russia in 1917 was because of the existence of the Bolshevik Party. If the Bolshevik Party had not been there, yes, the Tsar would have gone, but then the provisional government would have carried on the war and imposed whatever attacks were required upon the workers and peasants and all the rest. But there was a political party that was set out to take state power, that was guided by the most advanced thought in the world, that it was informed by Marx and Engels and Lenin and Trotsky and Plekhanov and a vast examination of experiences that was distilled in the Bolshevik Party. The most revolutionary party the world's ever seen.
Would you agree that right now is probably, I would say, the best time in my life, the biggest opportunity in my life for the working class to take that power? Because right now they have it. I talked to you about. I mean, you made a list of demands on one of the articles that you wrote. It was the one on Keir Starmer, actually, for the World Socialist website. And I said to you, I would have gone further. Why don't they strike, right? Why don't the workers organise a strike? Because right now would be the time to do it, because everybody's relying on them. They wouldn't. It's the optics. The optics of it are obviously going to be horrible, and the media would slam them, as they always do, because they work for the establishment. But that's the only way that the working class and the low wage workers are actually going to get anything out of this. They're not going to be given anything, and if they are given anything, they'll be taking what they're given will be taken away with the other hand. So, I suppose the point I'm trying to make is why are people just passively taking it?
I don't believe people are just passively taking it. I just don't. I don't accept this view. Look, if you're going to act, you've got to know what to do. What do you do about it? I mean, you say strike. Well, there's more people days lost work than in any general strike the world's ever seen. I mean, millions of working days are being lost because of the coronavirus. Yeah. A strike, the concept of it, the notion of a general strike is very important. But what does a general strike do in its most fundamental? If the working class takes general strike action, then what do you do after the general strike? Because you either return to work under the same social order, or it poses a question of taking power.
Well, it depends on what the demands are.
Well, but the demands are, are you placing even the most militant demands? Unless it factors in the working class can no longer tolerate rule by an oligarchy and a social system that is antithetical to its interests, then you can have the most militant demands in the world. And the day after the general strike finishes, or is betrayed, or is defeated, or victorious, call it what you will, you return to capitalism, and then eventually the ruling class would regroup, and there will be a down payment.
Do you think that do you think that the only way to change this then is a political revolution?
I think it's a social revolution, which takes a political form. You have to mobilise the working class independently of all other social classes for seizing state power. Moreover, that can't take place simply within one country. We live in a global system.
Yeah.
You have to have an international movement of the working class.
I want to talk to you about a couple of things before we leave, Chris, because I want to leave the best for last, actually, because I've had some fun this week. But first of all, you mentioned that politics. What do you see for after this? What do you see for after this crisis that we're in now? It's going to take a while before things get back to normal, and when they do get back to normal, they won't be normal anymore. We'll have new normals. What can you see for the future? What do you think that we need to concentrate on over the next few months and year? Because obviously people are at home, got plenty of time on their hands. They can send emails and letters at least and organise that way. What do you think? What can you see for us over the next, when things do get back to some modicum of normalcy, and what will that look like?
Well, I think that the term that you use is quite correct. It's a new normal. There won't be a return to normality.
No.
There's no going back from this. I mean, first of all,
we're going to have a mass amount of unemployed, aren't we?
There's going to be a raging economic crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen since the 1930s.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, I mean, this is on course to be worse than the 1929 crash. And the Great Depression, that was over 4 years. This is going to happen over 4 months or 4 weeks. And then you've got the whole economy shut down as well. So it's like having the Great Depression in the middle of World War II. Are we talking 30% unemployment here, like in America's going to see?
I think you're going to see mass unemployment. I don't want to put a figure on it. I think you're going to have an economic crisis.
It could be worse than I've ever seen in my lifetime, that's for sure.
Undoubtedly.
Are we going to...
When you're saying the new normal, I think, what is the new normal? You're seeing capitalism stripped bare, stripped naked before the eyes of the broad mass of the population. Yeah. The notion that this system would, at some point, even in the, everybody could kind of coexist with the profit system, is being smashed apart.
Yeah, the free market is not going to save you in a crisis. I think we've all okay. Everybody realises that now. Even capitalists are not saying the free market is going to save you anymore. Although they probably are.
Social tensions are going to develop on a scale the likes of which we've not seen in our lifetimes. The class struggle will develop accordingly. Before the coronavirus crisis hit, all last year saw massive movements of the working class all over the world. Millions took to the streets demanding social equality, democracy, in one country after another. This kind of called it to a halt, but it only postponed it.
Yeah.
In its aftermath, when people are being told to get back to work, to accept sacrifice, they're not going to accept that.
Yeah.
The ruling class will turn to authoritarianism. The political tendencies that once bestrode the world and owed the allegiance of millions have been completely discredited. The Labour Party is not going to recover.
No.
The Democratic Party, the Sanders experience, that Bernie Sanders might say vote Joe Biden, but a lot of people won't agree with him. It's been revealed as a right-wing party.
Yeah.
It was Hillary Clinton, now it's Joe Biden. It's pro-war, anti-Russia, attacking Trump, managing to attack Trump for the right.
Yeah.
On on certain issues. People want to deal with Trump. They can't deal with him through the Democratic Party.
Nope.
The working class wants to deal with Johnson, can't do it through the Labour Party. There will be a political realignment, and then the historical issues will come to bear. Look, if you want to know about socialism, you have to be familiar with Marx and Engels, Lenin, Trotsky, the history of the First International, the Second International, the Third International, and our party, the Fourth International, which is a history of struggle to build a vanguard party in the working class dedicated to socialism and internationalism that sets as its point of departure the independent political mobilization of the working class for power. If you don't have that, then the working class, in Luxemburg's famous phrase, is just material for exploitation.
Okay.
The working class, the ruling class has its state machine, it has its intellectuals, it has its media, it has all the rest. The working class has to have a party. First a party, second a party, last of all a party. And that's the issue for someone like you who's opposed to the system, opposed to its injustices, etc. It means going beyond individual protest and finding some form of collective social and political struggle based upon the working class. There might be all sorts of difficulties. Politics is not easy, and understanding the history of the workers' movement is also not easy.
No.
It's hugely complex, but those complexities doesn't mean it can't be understood. It just means you have to put some work into it.
There's no doubt.
You have to look at things historically. You can't.
Yeah, I know. I really have looked at the history of things, as you know, and you know, I'm not the most well read in the world, but I have tried to understand things, as you can see, and I look at the whole thing in horror right now as to how people have been treated and their avenues for fighting back have been cut off. Before we end, I want to talk to you about something that I've been very happy about this week, actually. It's something that I've took great schadenfreude in, and that's the death of the mainstream media. Because they're going bye-bye, aren't they, Chris?
Well, they're not in if I was their doctor...
It wouldn't be a good prognosis, because their system of consumerism, which is essentially what it is, has been built on write a bullshit headline, get them on the page and sell them some crap in advertising. And now all of that advertising revenue has gone away, or 95% of it. And they're on Twitter now, these people from the legacy media, from the Sun, etc., begging people to buy a paper. And nobody bloody is, because they know that they're all propagandists and liars. I think that something good will come out of this, and that is a different media going forward. Because it's clear to see that the old model is dead, isn't it, mate? And your model at the World Socialist website is going to be something that flourishes, I think, because you're not run by advertising and surviving on advertising. You're surviving on donations, and I know other places are doing okay on a subscription model. But that's going to be the way the media is going to be going forward, and our legacy media are going to be dying, and they're not going to return, are they?
No, I think it's not just a media change.
I'm very happy about this, mate.
Yeah,
I don't know whether you can tell. I'm very happy.
All over your face. Here's the thing, Gordon. It's not just a change in media. I think it's a change in the cultural environment. Yes, I think that all of the old political nostrums have been blown out of the water. There's going to be a political realignment. And that's going to take all sorts of forms, including the emergence not just of new media sources, but new parties. I mean, obviously, my understanding of all of this is that what is being prepared is a shift in the working class towards a revolutionary orientation, towards a socialist and internationalist orientation. As is not the success of the World Socialist website is not because of just a business model. It's because the politics that we espouse is meeting broader recognition in the working class. Our readership is going up vastly.
Yeah.
Vastly.
Yeah, I was just drawing. I wasn't drawing that. I just wanted to say that you're doing well, and the media as we know it is not.
No, but I think that the reason that which will survive, and it won't be just the World Socialist website, but that which will survive and flourish, are those that address the basic fundamental issues of the day. Those that don't, toady after the ruling elite, but set themselves up in opposition to the ruling elite. That set themselves in opposition to the existing social order. That look for something progressive as an alternative to reaction. That is going to be a broad-based movement. Within that movement, the Socialist Equality Party, the International Committee of the Fourth International, we seek to advance the most conscious, programmatic, historical, internationalist perspective to build the necessary leadership to take that struggle forward to victory. But we won't be alone. There's going to be a vast change in the cultural and political and social environment, which is the only basis for the development of a socialist movement in the working class. A lot of things have failed. A lot of things that have failed a long time ago have been revealed to have failed by this crisis.
Yeah.
There's no going back. It's the new normal for capitalism is extreme brutality. Extreme brutality. There are no barriers, there's no limits to what they will not be prepared to do to preserve their system. The new normal for the working class is one in which all of the old tendencies and organizations have failed, and they will be searching for some way of fighting for their interests, opposing the development of right-wing tendencies, the spread of xenophobia, nationalism, social reaction, the destruction of jobs, wages, conditions, and in which a revolutionary perspective becomes the most realistic perspective imaginable. It's not a linear process. There are all sorts of difficulties in the development of the working class. In that sense, big changes have to take place. But whatever illusions exist among sections of workers, reality is a great teacher.
Yeah.
And socialism is not an abstract idea. It consciously articulates the interests of the broad mass of the working class. And that, I think, is why this is, however difficult and really difficult things are going to be in the next period, this is a time for political optimism. Well, I think what you've accomplished and others, many others, in bucking against the trends.
I've accomplished nothing.
Well, you've highlighted injustices. You're not alone. I think that is a beginning of something else, something far broader. I think all of the difficulties of those that have sought to defend Julian Assange will be revealed as a necessary sorting out, a clarification of perspective, because it's now very clear that a lot of things that were tried have failed.
Yeah. And
that sentiment won't go away, but I think it will now become, that struggle will be taken up by new layers. In the next period, I think that, I'm quite confident that broad sections of the working class will rally to Assange's cause. I think the same thing with respect to the struggle against the Tory government, against war. All sorts of things are going to begin to mobilize broad masses that have been held back by rotten leaderships.
I really hope that that's the case, Chris. I really do. I'm optimistic, at least for the media now going forward. I will say that. Is there anything else you want to talk about, mate, while I got you?
Well, if you don't mind,
You carry on, buddy. The
I want
stage is yours.
I know we have no advertising here, but we have an international May Day rally organised by the World Socialist website on May the 2nd, because it's a Saturday. That's why it's not May Day. And it will be discussing the coronavirus, the pandemic, from the standpoint of the demonstrable failure of the profit system of capitalism, and as socialist, the necessity to base for the working class to base itself on a struggle for a socialist perspective.
You say it's May the 2nd, and what is it? I mean, obviously people can't. Is that going to be online? Is it?
It will be online. And
if you send me the details afterwards, I'll put all the links and everything below this, mate. Go and see that.
I'm anticipating that you'll be one of the many, many thousands tuning in.
You know I will, mate. Chris Marsden, thank you very much for all you've done and all you are doing going forward. You're a great man. Everybody go and read the World Socialist website. I do quite often. Thanks very much, Chris. Keep fighting, brother.
Thank you, brother.
I'm proud to call you my mate.
Thank you very much, Gordon.